Okay, thank
Clara.
you. Yes, thank you, Jenny, and thanks everybody who's online. So Keith and I have prepared an update for you of our activities of the working group over the past year, as you see here on the first slide. So we're excited to tell you about what I think has been an extremely productive year for the working group, culminating in the Large Ensembles workshop that we had last week, and we'll talk about that as we go along. So just the way that we've approached, our working group initially, we decided that we needed to get to know each other. There are 20 working group members from around the world, and they come from all areas of climate science, expertise in the ocean, land, atmosphere, biogeochemistry, etc. So we really had to, I felt like, get to know each other's scientific interests, and then in particular, thoughts about the working group as it relates to large ensembles. So to do that, we just went in alphabetical order, and we held telecons every 2 to 4 weeks, starting in about a year ago, or even a little longer than a year ago. And I think they were really, they were excellent. We really got all very stimulated by all the different types of science and expertise that we have. And then also it got us thinking about, how we might work together in the group. So that's what we did. And then the telecons more recently in 2019, so after we had heard from everybody, all 20 people, then we changed the scope of the telecons, and we focused more on, now actually getting the activities of the working group underway. So there are 3 of them, as you see listed here, that we discussed, and all have now come to fruition, and that's why I'm really happy with how productive and how engaged every single member of this working group has been. So I can't say enough about how well it's gone and how I think the group has really come together. So the first project was I and the others felt very strongly about the importance of making these large ensembles accessible to the wide community. So we have built and will be continuing to expand a centralized data repository of existing large ensembles with CMIP-5 models. I'll speak about it more on the next slide, but it was a huge amount of work. And in the end, we have 7, to date, we have 7 CMIP-5 class models that have run large ensembles for the historical and future time period. And these data, we made them accessible, publicly available. Secondly, we talked about a scope and whether, what kind of, if it would be useful at this early stage to come up with some working group paper about the utility of multimodel large ensembles. So I think the word has gotten out about the utility of large ensembles in general, but now what can you do when you have large ensembles with many models? So we've written a paper, it's now under review at Nature Climate Change. We should hear pretty soon, I think in the next few weeks, on the reviews. And then the third big item was the planning for the summer workshop, which we just held last week, and which by all measures was a resounding success. And I don't say that lightly. I think it was really, really great. Okay, so, and then also, that we also held a large ensemble session and a working group side meeting at the fall AGU last year, December 2018, which were well attended. Okay, so the first of our projects that has now come to fruition, the Multimodel Large Ensemble Archive, and Flavio Lehner, who was the leader of this. And he's on the working group. He's currently a project scientist at NCAR. He also has an affiliation with ETH in Zurich, Switzerland, and he'll be going there for the next year, but he'll continue to work and be very engaged with the working group. So we have a website, and we have announced this website at the workshop, and we have plans to really communicate that this website exists now. So the data are kind of served to the community the way that we did it for the CSM1 large ensemble. We use that model of single variable time series, one-stop shopping for this set of models that you see in the table here. And already, even at the workshop, people had already availed themselves. And there's a lot now that can be done once the data are so accessible to the community. So we are, as I said, the workshop, there was just so much enthusiasm for sharing large ensembles with each other. And so I think we're going to add to this list from other groups, and even with this new CMIP6 models. Some have already run large ensembles. We'll add them here as they, if the modeling groups agree. And then we also talked about adding AMIP large ensembles, so it doesn't just have to be coupled model large ensembles. We talked about adding long control runs on here. Maybe there's some other things that I've forgotten, but again, I think this could be a really valuable centralized, it is already data repository for these large ensembles. It's just key fields at this point so that it's not, doesn't get too big. But again, we're open to, getting suggestions for what people want to see put on here. Okay, so that was number one. The second big project was the working group paper. And you have the title here, Strength in Numbers, the utility of large ensembles with multiple Earth system models. So it's available on my website. It has been under review at Nature Climate Change, I think, for a few weeks now. So hopefully we'll hear back by the end of the summer. And the purpose of this was really to just be very straightforward, simple diagrams to kind of convey what can be done, what you can learn about model assessment, what you can learn about model intercomparisons, and what you can learn about the observational record when you have large ensembles from many models. So again, really the focus, the theme was what you can do when you have large ensembles with lots of multiple models. So we have 5 figures that I think of as kind of best practices, if you will, on how to use large ensembles sensibly, how to extract the forced response, how to compare with a single realization of observations, and really getting at, the confounding of internal variability with a forced response. So I'm proud of the paper. Everybody in the working group, we had so many excellent discussions and, of course, renditions of figures, etc. And in the end, I think, anyway, I feel like it's a useful, really useful paper. Okay, and then the third thing is the summer workshop. And this is the collection of people. And again, just really proud of how it went. So basically, it was, the abstract deadline was, I think, March 8th, if I remember right. And we were, at that point, oversubscribed. So the size of the workshop was dictated by the number of seats in the main seminar room at the NCAR Mesa Lab. So I think there were 115 seats. So we had to cut it off. We actually had a wait list. And I think it was an excellent size group because it wasn't too big. We did webcast all the plenary sessions, and I'll speak to that in a moment here. So this was the scientific organizing committee drawn from members of the working group, and they were all absolutely fantastic in their ideas and shaping, I think, what came out to be a really just stimulating workshop. So each person here listed played a key role in the success of the workshop. So again, just briefly, the purpose of the workshop, so is to exchange knowledge and ideas about large ensembles as it relates to really all areas of climate science and beginning to go into impacts in other fields. Then the second purpose, to foster new research directions and collaboration. So again, sparking ideas, brainstorming that happened during the workshop. And I think people told me that they really came away with a lot of very interesting new ideas for future research. So I was really happy to hear that. And then the third purpose was to think about whether how one designs large ensembles and whether we actually wanted to make a recommendation to the community to have a coordinated strategy for large ensembles across modeling centers in the future. And there was no consensus about that, and I'll say a few words about that in a moment. So again, I mentioned that we had 115 participants, dictated by the size of the conference room. And I guess Mike Patterson told me that it had the highest number of early career scientists of any previous US CLIVAR workshop. And again, we weren't, we didn't know who was registering, so it just happened that way. But I think it just speaks to, that this is an up and coming field, and large ensembles have a central role to play. And I think the excitement in the room throughout the 3 days was really, I think, due in large part to that we had so many early career scientists there who are really, the future and very forward looking. I think we had a rough gender balance. It was really wonderful. I think it was maybe almost half and half, maybe slightly fewer women, and again, we weren't prescribing this at all. We just, took everybody who registered. And we had a really good international participation, mostly from Europe, but someone from South Africa, I think some people from Japan and China as well, and some other countries in Asia. So as I said at the beginning, real broad diversity of backgrounds, and you see the fields listed here. We had some wonderful talks on air quality, on health, economics, statistics. So we're really reaching, what I was hoping for in this workshop. It was not to speak to, the community that already knows about large ensembles, but to communities that don't, and also get very interactive cross-fertilization amongst all these different aspects. And I think that really happened. We had a lot of webcast viewers. I guess, again, Mike Patterson told me higher than any previous CLIVAR workshop. So we had 187 different viewers on day one, international, 139 on day two, and then dropped off on day three. But again, I was really happy that we could webcast the plenary sessions, and I was really happy that there's such interest in the community. Okay, so just briefly what the workshop, I gave an overview, introduction at the workshop, and this is one of my slides. So we structured it first with some sort of key talks on, what progress has been made in large ensemble research, and Flavio highlighted the Multimodel Large Ensemble Archive, how to access it and its utility, and showing some figures from the working group paper. We talked about Karen McKinnon's work on the observationally based large ensemble. That got a lot of interest. I think it's a very important aspect. And then Nikki Lovendusky talked about the use of large ensembles in decadal prediction for ocean biogeochemistry. Then we had a lot of invited, not a lot, but we had a balanced number of invited and contributed talks on applications of large ensembles. And I've listed some of the talks here, some of the topics here. And then we had 2 breakout discussions. The first had to do with the types of foundational science that is enabled by large ensembles. And then the second had to do with how to design large ensembles. I think both were really fruitful. So I emphasized that this is an interactive workshop. So interactive, we had lots of ways for people to discuss with each other. And it was a workshop where people were engaged and working, not just, passively listening. So we had 3 poster sessions. They were all in the morning, and people really like that because it gets you out of the seminar room and it really puts the posters front and center. And we had about 90 posters, so it was super important to me to make them a central focus of the workshop. We divided the whole group, of participants into 8 groups of 12 people each for the breakouts, and that gave everybody a voice. And we all discussed the same questions. And then we had one person who synthesized the discussions across all 8 groups the next morning. And that gave continuity. And it also, I think, did a nice method of summarizing and synthesizing the comments from all the discussions. And then we had long lunches, we had a reception, we had an early morning hike. These were all great ways to foster interaction. And then the outcomes, again, as I said, were to foster usage of large ensembles, advance new applications, and then to inform large ensemble design. And I think we really actually accomplished these outcomes. So I'll end with next steps. So I was sort of waiting for this workshop to inform, the next year and a half of the working group. So we're roughly halfway through, where do we want to go from here? And I wanted to see how the workshop went and what the input and feedback was there before deciding what made. So here are some of the next steps that we talked about. So first, as I see it, for the working group. So we want to expand the Multimodel Large Ensemble Archive, adding more models, variables, aiming large ensembles, single forcing large ensembles. I forgot to mention that there was a lot of interest in Ben Santer's talk on, assessing aerosol impacts and other forcing agents. And so we want to put single forcing large ensembles on there as well. Then I didn't talk about yet, but we're developing a climate variability diagnostics package that we have at NCAR, but one that's specifically tailored for large ensembles. Adam Phillips is doing that, and we have made excellent progress. And I'm looking forward to finalizing that and sharing it with the community. I don't have time on this telecon to show you the results, but we're well on our way, and it's really excellent. And we do a lot with how to place the observations within the context of model spread. I don't have time to talk about this. You can ask me in the Q&A if you like. And then finally, to add to our next steps, number 3, of course, we'll write a workshop report. We're thinking it'll be fairly brief, maybe to EOS, somewhere where we can get it out quickly. Then was talk in our final discussion session at the workshop in plenary that it might be really nice to write some kind of synthesis of best practices in large ensemble usage, and then strategic design considerations for future large ensembles. There's a lot of trade-offs that one has to think about, and it might be just nice to really flesh these out in some kind of a white paper. We would like to continue to convene large ensemble sessions at AGU and AMS. Those are already underway for 2019, and we'll hopefully do that in the final year of the working group as well. And then because the workshop was so wonderful, and I just felt like this is a group that now has some familiarity and I think should meet again, we suggested in our final discussion at the workshop whether there was interest in a hackathon on this multi-model large ensemble archive, and there was great enthusiasm. So somehow I would like to figure out how to spearhead that, maybe for spring of 2020, and then to hold a second large ensemble workshop, maybe a year from now or a little longer. And again, have no idea how to fund that, but I know that there's tremendous interest, and I think it can really just advance the field in general if we do that. So I think that that's it, and happy to take questions. And Keith, of course, anything that you want to add, we can maybe do that in the Q&A. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Clara. So a reminder that if you have any questions, feel free to take yourself off mute and speak up, or you can also type your question in the chat box. Do you have any questions?
Can you hear me, Alison?
Yep, we can hear you.
You can hear me. So Clara, great presentation.
Sorry.
Alison MacDonald.
Thank you.
Great presentation. So maybe this speaks to your number 4 with the formulating of the white papers, but as somebody who has often considered and actually written into proposals that they would use, these kinds of ensembles as a way of comparing to observational results. I'm wondering if you have, how does somebody who doesn't know a lot about, how they're created, how they're formulated, know what to choose from your archive so that what you're comparing are in some way consistent? I mean, is there metadata that one can look at to understand that?
So in the working group paper that's under review now at Nature Climate Change, I see that as sort of a brief synthesis of best practices. That's how we formulated the paper, and that would be I would point you to that, and of course others. And it's on my website. You're welcome to download it. And it covers things like, okay, how do we compare models? Now we have enough members from these different large ensembles that we can compare models' forced responses by taking their ensemble means. We can compare models' internal variability. And then we can use the observational large ensemble to assess the realism of models' internal variability, which is super important. And then we use all of that to then shed light on how to interpret the observational record. What do models tell us about the forced response in observation, contribution of internal variability, and the uncertainties in those contributions because of structural differences across models. We have an example of, these large ensembles are super valuable for testing methodologies applied to observations to assess forced components. We have a section on extreme events. Extreme events are rare by definition, so in any single simulation, you only have a few. but now you have lots when you pool ensemble members, so it's a really useful application to extreme events. And there's two other figures there. And then we actually have a whole subsection on trade-offs and considerations for designing large ensembles. And, you know, do we want to, how valuable are these relative to high resolution models, which coupled models, which of course take, you know, many more resources, but can tell us things that these coarser resolution models can't. So we're just trying to really put out there, you know, how to use the utility of these large ensembles. So I hope it's valuable, and I think this next step maybe of a white paper could go much more broadly into these issues.
Yeah, no, it sounds great.
Any other questions?
Hi, Clara. This is Anish.
Hi, Anish.
Thanks for the great summary. Hey. So I was wondering regarding these large data sets, and people can access them easily, but in terms of analysis, if people don't have local computational resources to do analysis on these large data sets, would you see opportunities for the program managers or funding agencies to support some kind of analysis-based computational needs of the community? And could US CLIVAR help in that?
That's a really important issue that I'm so glad you brought up. So when we announced it to the working group, we had actually already sent all the participants of the working group an email telling them about this archive, maybe, I forget, a month ago or something. That's why some of them had already used it. But I announced at the workshop that I'm happy to, for anyone who asks me, to give people a Sizzle account, you know, with the project number just for analysis purposes. Obviously, that's probably not tenable if, you know, if too many people do that. So I think I would love to talk to you more about how to enable this. How do we go about, the other half of the equation, not just accessing the data, but giving people the means to do the analysis. I'm not well versed in it at all, so I'm very. I'd love to talk to you offline and anybody else about that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Clara. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a point because at the US CLIVAR SSC meeting, there was a conversation with the program managers about supporting some kind of infrastructure for analysis. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can discuss this at our summit next week on how to facilitate this.
Cool.
Yeah, I can follow up with you. Yeah.
And maybe just to speaking to that point, the climate variability diagnostics package for large ensembles that we're developing. Of course, it's not going to fulfill everyone's needs. I'm not pretending that, but it does a lot, and a lot under the hood. You know, computing EOFs of all the ensemble members of all the models that one gives it. It's huge, and then all of those results are net CDF files, and then the user just takes those, and then they're set up to do their next step of analysis. So I think these packages are also maybe one valuable step ingredient.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Right,
hello, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Can you hear? Okay. Hi, Clara. Yeah, this is Xijing Davis from NSF Arctic Natural Sciences Program. Thank you for your talk. Hi. Yeah, so I think it's really valuable effort. I wonder if there are any plan to integrate the coming observation data in the polar region, for example, the Mosaic campaign observations, and also some existing observational projects from Yale Polar Prediction kind of programs, and if there are any plan to do CS kind of large ensemble.
So I don't know of any plans to integrate the newer observational data from the Arctic. I'm not quite sure what you mean by sea ice from large ensembles. We definitely want, I don't know if we have it yet, but definitely I certainly want to have on our multimodel large ensemble archive, I want to have sea ice concentration and thickness from the models. If it's not there yet, it will be, as long as, you know, the modeling group share that. In terms of our observationally based large ensemble, I don't know if that's what you're speaking to as well. I think that could be extended to sea ice. I've thought about it. Actually, I had some conversations with a guy named Mark England a while ago. And I think that would be a very nice thing to do. It's more challenging because the records aren't as long, and and the variability maybe changes with climate change, which is another thing large ensembles are good for looking at. But I think that would be a very nice project for sure, and it's definitely on my radar. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, this is Keith. Just one thing in response to the question. I guess having over the last couple of days with researchers that are part of the NSF-funded SOCOM project, the project being run by Jorge Sarmiento, there's tremendous interest on the part of the people looking at Argo in the Southern Ocean in connecting to this large ensemble work, and they're just kind of tuning into the large ensemble availability. And I expect that it's just a matter of clearly communicating, and some of the issues that have just been discussed now, being clear about all of these issues will help with that. But I think that the all scales in the Southern Ocean are ripe for being explored with the large ensemble.
What I'd like to do with, thank you, Keith, and remind me that what I want to do with this large ensembles, part of the working group, is to host a website, probably at NCAR, where it's like a place where, like the Argo people or people who are just entering, this, where they want to connect with large ensembles, where we have, just in plain English what large ensembles are, what their utility is, some publications listed on there, a forum for people to ask questions, advertising the archive, the diagnostics package, just sort of central place, like we did for the CSM1 large ensemble, but now just much more general. And I'm hoping that can be kind of a, just a locus for, the very broad community as a landing place to get information about large ensembles.
Yeah, thank you both, Clara and Keith. Yeah.
All right, I think we are going to start wrapping up. Do we have any final questions for Clara and Keith? I don't see any. Clara and Keith, do you guys have any final messages that you want to leave off before we end this webinar?
No, people at the workshop, so many people said this was the best workshop they've been to, or one of the best, but like the best, from people like Ben Santer and, people, and all the young people said the same thing. And I was just really happy with, that there's interest, but also the way our community works, that people really enjoy discussing and talking and getting excited about new science that is enabled by these large ensembles. Yeah, it was really, really great.
Yeah, and I think it reflects the SOC that was part of this workshop too, because they did a great job of organizing it and making sure that we had everything that we needed. So thank you, Clara and Keith, for that. So I guess we'll wrap up. So I want to say a final thank you to Clara and Keith for presenting at today's webinar. This wraps up our 2019 pre-summit webinar series. So for those participating in our summit, please keep an eye out on your emails, as the project office will be sending additional details to help prepare for the meeting. So with that, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar.